I've been a blacksmith armorer for over 30 years. I've created weapons for over 200 feature films. This is Man-at-Arms. I think the Hidden Blade from Assassin's Creed has been by far the most requested build so far. You asked for it, here it is. I'm trying to reverse engineer this that I've taken apart from a really bitchin' toy, trying to figure out how it's going to work. Ubisoft had supplied us with a copy of the licensed toy, so I'm reverse engineering it from there, which is very helpful. I'm just going to take what they've made as a usable licensed toy and make it real. This is going to be made out of cable Damascus. This is a solid 1.5" diameter cable, probably 300 strands that I've MIG welded the end, and I'll forge that into a solid bar, and then in turn that will be the blade for it. The wire rope or cable that I use for making the cable Damascus, it's a 2-inch diameter wire rope with probably about 300 strands of cable on there. It comes in a fairly loose spiral, so I take that, heat it up and flux it, and then tighten it in the vise to compress the fibers in the cable. And I'll take that and forge that out and turn it into a cable Damascus blade. When you look at it when it's etched, it's going to look like a reptilian scale pattern in there. So when you grind through each of the cables, it has a neat look. So I'm going to take this is a little bit too thick and a little bit too wide, so I'm going to put it back in the forge, thin it down, make it narrower and thinner on the blade, and then forge it back out. After I got the blade rough ground and then sanded down to 120 grit, I took it to the Satin Glow polishing wheel and just refined the edges. And then from there, I just wanted to see how the cable Damascus would look, and I dipped it into a vat of ferric chloride just to give an initial etch. I will etch it for the finish etch after I do the heat treatment. Brian has milled a 5/16 slot through most of the blade that'll be inlaid with a brass trim that corresponds to the licensed game copy. The blade has been heat treated and polished up and in turn etched for a long time in the ferric chloride to really bring out the grain structure of the cable Damascus. Still haven't totally figured out how I'm going to rig the spring mechanism in there, but by test day we'll have that thing working and it'll be a real blade. The wrist blade was really, really cool, but I'm really known for doing swords. I've done thousands of pieces for Pirates of the Caribbean and Master and Commander and other pirate movies. For Assassin's Creed 4, they're doing everything pirate related, so I figured I'd make a cutlass. It's actually very similar to the sword I made for Pirates of the Caribbean for Elizabeth Swann to use in Pirates 2. And so that's based on George Washington's hunting sword from, I don't know, about 1760 or something. I've forged the bevels of the cutlass on the side of the power hammer using the drawing dies, which caused the cutlass to go from a straight blade to a curved blade, and then drew out the tang a little bit more. We've threaded the tang to a 3/8/16 thread. The blade has a back fuller, which would be typical of what I use in Jack Sparrow's sword for Pirates of the Caribbean, but it's also got a 2-inch wide middle fuller coming down the blade to lighten it. The blade's probably 2.5 inches wide, and then it has a 10-inch contact wheel hollow grind as the cutting edge. So we've got 3 different radius kind of fullers or grooves coming up the blade to kind of skeletonize it. So it's got a really nice look and cuts the weight down considerably. The pommel is just a forged piece of bronze that we've turned down to about 1 inch in diameter. The hilt was forged out of an ingot of bronze and file work to give it the detail with the open work there. I'm going to be making the handle for the cutlass out of water buffalo horn. I'll chop that up with a bandsaw. Buffalo horn or cow horn or even tortoiseshell is kind of the plastics of that era. It's a really bright, polished, beautiful material. And when that's finished, you'll see it's just going to have an internal glow to it. I could have used something synthetic, but I figured since I'm forging a blade and doing all the fancy grinds to it and forging the bronze hilt and pommel, might as well use something traditional for it. So it'll be a real fancy looking piece. So for the hidden blade, we've also had Johnny work through on the leather work, patterning out some of the pieces where he's tooling the leather, and we'll be stitching that up and putting that together. Once the leather is stained, he's going to use some solvents and age it and distress it to give it a worn look, and then we'll be stitching around the edge perimeter. We've also soldered in the brass in the channel that we previously milled into the blade, and we've also sculpted the skull, taken a mold off of it, then in turn shot wax into those molds, and then sprued them or attached the wax patterns to a sprue base and poured plaster of Paris type compound called Investment over the top and burned that out, leaving a cavity in the shape of the skull. And when we pour the molten bronze in there, it takes on the shape of the skull in that cavity. And we take the hot Investment and put it into a bucket of water. Everything dissolves, leaving the bronze skulls. The hardest part of the Assassin's Creed wrist blade has really got to be figuring out the mechanism. I really delegated it to Chris and Alicia to put together the mechanism and the decorative channels. I had Chris, who's a gunsmith, work the spring mechanism and the channel on there. The problem with making these things is we don't want it to be a ballistic knife. So we want the blade to shoot out and then stop at a certain level. If we make it too strong, then the knife shoots out like a bullet. So that would be bad. Alicia and I detailed out all the elements on the top and the trigger with the cast bronze skull and everything. It came out great. Looks beautiful. I hope everyone likes it. I really enjoyed putting it together. There's nothing hidden about the subscribe button, so why not go ahead and assassinate it for us? There's plenty more gamer weapons in the armory below. If there's a particular game weapon you don't see in there and you'd like to see it next, tell me about it in the comments below.